Very good evening. Warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Welcome to a new week as I wrap up my time in Scotland. 2 shows last week at the Alfred Dunhill Links Championships. If you missed them, we had a really interesting conversation with Big Skulkberger, who played in the tournament for the first time with his son, Skulk Jr., a pair of Skulks, casting a rather considerable presence over the old course at St Andrews, along with Kingsbarns and Carnoustie. And Skulk told us, amongst other things, about the wine he has produced in celebration of the life of the great Dodie Weir, the Scottish rugby legend. They've got a Bubbles, which is raising money for the Dodie Foundation and the fight against motor neuron disease. And then we also had a really cool evening with Gareth Robertson from Anthony Rupert Wines, along with Chris Groenevold and Heidi Kritzinger, as they taught me the art of blind tasting. They are the 3-person team representing South Africa in Provence. I think that's actually later this week as they take on the rest of the world. Best finish ever has been 6th. I'm backing them for a top 5 under Captain Chris. So 2 really fun shows last week, and our last one from Scotland continues that theme because we've got 2 really fun spaces to look at. One is a surfing winemaker of some renown who has got new releases out to talk about, as well as to have a quick look back at the success of the Nedbank Cape Winemakers Guild auction, which happened over the weekend. Once again, a great success. And then an email that arrived in my inbox last week from Andre Morgenthal with a really fun development in a space that South Africa is doing more and more to nurture and to celebrate. That space is Old Vines. And Nadia from the Old Vine Project joins us on the show today to look at what they are doing and why this is just so important for South African wine. It's a really, really fun space, but also an important one in terms of the heritage of South African wine, and also just making some seriously good stuff out of them. So that is to come. Miles and Nadia on the show today. They'll be joining me in just a moment. Before they do, though, let's have a quick look at some wine news. This is that Old Vine Academy. We're going to be talking about this in some detail with Nadia in a moment, and a little later in the show we've actually got a video which gives you some more information around it. But it is the chance to learn, to study, to embrace this aspect of South African wine that's so important. This is the course. Again, Nadia will tell us about it in slightly more detail. It's not terribly expensive for what you get out of it. It's online. You work at your own pace, and it'll take you 20 odd hours to get through and complete, depending on who you are and how much work you do. I think it's a really valuable one, and Nadia will be telling us a bit more about it in just a moment. Now, I think this is going to be announced the 10th of November or thereabouts. This is an annual competition. Porcupine Ridge gets stuck into this with great gusto. And it's quite competitive. The Pizzeria of the Year. Who makes the best pizza? This is one of these things. Everybody knows the place that does the best pizza. Just nobody has the same 2 places. The contestants are from across South Africa. This is public vote. I think the votes are all in, but the actual winner will be announced in just about a month's time or thereabouts. So we'll keep you posted on it. And you never know whether it's the actual winner of the top 10. There might be one in your area that you've never seen, never discovered. So good opportunity to go around, bottle of Porcupine Ridge and a pizza or 2. Just celebrating some of the great restaurants in South Africa. This has been going for a little while now, and Linton Kaiser and his team will be updating us, as I say, in about a month with the winner of this year's Porcupine Ridge Pizzeria Challenge for 2023. And Ex Animo Wine School, it starts this week on Wednesday. It's your last chance, if you haven't yet, to sign up. The guys at Ex Animo putting together a really cool chance to learn more about wine. This is David Clark and his team. He was on the show not that long ago talking about this very space. So if you feel like wine school is something that is worth having a look at, it's we were having this conversation last week in Scotland with some of the wine drinkers who were drinking South African wine from other parts of the world and just learning and understanding more. sure, the more you learn, the more you understand about what you're drinking, the more you appreciate, the more you value the different wines that you get to try. And so I think if you have the opportunity, it's over a course of 4 evenings, couple of hours on a Wednesday night down at the Exanimo headquarters in Woodstock. I think you'll really, really enjoy this. Head to their website if you'd like to get involved. Comes with double thumbs up from Dan Really Likes Wine. Okay, well, I am at the Russix Hotel where I have been for a week or so before I head back to South Africa later on tonight. The chance to catch up with two people who are doing some really, really good stuff in the South African wine industry. One of them is continuing to make quite exceptional wine when his surfing allows, and the other is introducing through the Old Vine Project the chance for all of us to get to know a little bit more about old vines, about why they are so important, and about why we need to cherish and look after them as they are doing so well. So Miles, Nadia, welcome to both of you. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. And to kick off, Miles, congratulations, because it's been a busy weekend for the Cape Winemakers Guild. Lots of wines sold at some great prices. Yours foremost amongst them, as is always the case. Just give us a sense as a member of the Guild, and you have been for a while now, why this weekend is so important, not just for the selling of wine and showcasing of wine, but for what it allows you guys as the Guild to do in terms of safeguarding, looking after, taking care of the South African wine industry.
Yeah, I think foremost the Guild is a lot more than just the auction, as you mentioned. A big part of the Cape Winemakers Guild is the Protégé program, where we take young students, young graduates, and mentor them through a process to get them sort of better equipped to go into the wine industry, into the wine world. So there's a lot of fundraising around that, around the auction, to raise funds specifically for to run this Protégé program that is so important through the Cape Winemakers Guild Nedbank Development Trust. But then also just to showcase really exceptional world-class wines, and to showcase these wines through the auction, and then showcase and show that these wines are worthy of the prices they achieve. You know, too often South Africa's wines are especially internationally, are perceived as really good value and pretty affordable wines, and our wines are really exceptional and are world beaters and world class. So for us, it's very, very important to showcase those wines and get them out there. And yeah, and generally it's a great event. It's lots of fun, always is, around wine and food and people, and been a great success again this year.
The fact that this auction runs at the same time as the Rugby World Cup is a nice coincidence, because these are two spaces in wine and sport in general, rugby in particular, where smiles are put on South African faces, where South Africa is done so proud on a global scale. And as you look back at this weekend, that will have been reminded to all of us as to how much of an impact South African wine continues to have. That next generation, the protégés that you speak of, it's a conversation we had not that long ago with some of your fellow Guild members. When you look at these new young winemakers coming through with a wonderful combination of talent and excitement, how upbeat, how positive is Miles Mossop about the future of South African wine based on the next generation coming through that you guys are doing so much to support?
No, very, very positive. Just last night we had a function, obviously around the auction, and two of the young protégés who I actually hadn't met yet, the first year protégés that have been through their first year of mentorship, came up to me, and you know, they were so excited and so passionate about wine, so passionate about the industry. The one a lot more focused on wine quality and absolute perfection. The other one, protégé, more focused on wine education and upliftment. And you can just see that this young generation going to the industry are really going to take it forward and take us to the next level. And very, very exciting. And I think we're starting to see the results of it with a number of protégés that have been through the program over a number of years, achieving great results as winemakers in their own right now. And their wines are becoming not just well-known and well awarded in the South African context, but also in the international context. You know, I think about Kiara Scott at Brookdale, and I think about Rudger at Star Conde, and he also has his own brand. And you know, those wines are exceptional, and they're really achieving great accolades and great awards and great renown.
If you've come across my column this month in Airlinks in Flight Magazine, I suggest that Rutger might be the first person to come full circle and become a member of the Cape Winemakers Guild, having been a protege. And I think Chiara wouldn't be too far behind either. Some wonderful news coming out of the weekend. You've got some new wine, Miles. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But before I jump over to Nadia, I just want to get your sense of the Old Vine project. We know that it's something that a lot of people led by Rosa have put a lot of time and effort into. Why for you as a winemaker is this Old Vine project so important? Why are old vines something we really need to make an extra special effort to look after and to care for in South Africa?
So actually, just on that, I recently joined the Old Vines project this year. I've had a few wines in my portfolio which have qualified, but they were tiny production, and I didn't really get around to joining the Old Vines project. But now I have 3 wines that are from certified Old Vines vineyards and registered Old Vines, and have the Old Vines seal on them. A Chardonnay, a Chenin Blanc, and a Sauvignon Blanc, as well as a Noble 8 Harvest from Chenin Blanc. I think number one is to preserve our heritage. We want to keep these vines in the ground. It's not always the case that an old vine makes the best wine. But one thing I have seen is that old vines always make interesting wines, and they make wines that create conversation, obviously just around the heritage and their origin. But also, I find the thing about old vines when it comes to flavor profiles is there's always an amazing textural component to the wines, which makes them so interesting. So I had a conversation with Chris Allight recently, and he brought some things to my attention that I wasn't aware of, specifically talking about Chenin Blanc and the old vine Chenins in South Africa, and how these Chenins through massal selection, so not getting vines from nurseries, but going back into the past 100, 200 years, where farmers would actually go to their neighbor or go to their best vineyards and take cuttings from those and propagate those to propagate the next vineyards. And through that massal selection, you'll have a natural genetic adaptation of a vineyard or a vine or a variety to its environment. And if you continue doing that over a period of time, over generations of plantings, eventually you end up with quite a unique vineyard that is actually only really adapted to that environment and those soils it's growing in, and that climate and that microclimate. And I think that speaks to our heritage. And we have these heritage vineyards, which is what it's all about. And we need to preserve them and make sure they don't get uprooted. And through the Old Vines project, it almost protects them, brings attention to them. It'll raise the grape prices. It'll raise the wine prices. And in that way, it'll keep those vines on the ground.
So what exactly are old vines? How do you qualify? How does all of this work? Well, let's jump over to Nadia. Welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on. Very exciting that the Academy is now launching. Before we find out what the Academy is and how this works, just give us the very simple introduction. There are people who might not know much at all about the Old Vine project. What is it? What is an old vine? How does one qualify? And how did this space come to be? Oh, just have you on mute there, Nadia. There we go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me on the show, Dan. So the journey of old vines in South Africa looking for old vines started back in 2002 by our chairperson, Rosa Kruger. And Rosa started to travel internationally, and she tasted a lot of different old vines across the world. And then she started to realize that there's a really interesting character from old vine wines. And then she came back to South Africa and started to search for these old vines. And then she found a few beautiful sites with the help of vineyard workers and other fellow winemakers and viticulturalists. And then in 2016, the project was formalized, and with seed funding from the Rupert Foundation. And then there was a structure around the Old Vine project. So if you have a vineyard that is 35 years or older, you can register this vineyard with the Old Vine project, and then also add the seal, the Certified Heritage Vineyard seal, to your bottle that indicates the plant date of what the wine is made from. And we've just seen this project grow from strength to strength. We've got fantastic winemakers like Miles on board, and it's great to see the passion and the commitment in the preservation of these heritage vineyards.
Keeping these going just for the sake of keeping them going wouldn't have much point. There's got to be a reason to it. But surely if they're getting old, they won't be as good anymore. Why keep them? What's the value of having an older vine? How does that translate into extra special wine?
Just referencing Miles's comment as well, it's not that we're saying all old vineyards make beautiful wines, but there's definitely a character that old wines brings to the glass. And we've seen this proven by various research projects. For example, there was a Chenin Blanc research project done by Stellenbosch University, and they actually identified that there are certain aroma compounds that old vine Chenin Blanc has, and they've actually adapted the aroma wheel to include these specific old vine characteristics. And we also find that there's a certain complexity, a certain texture and mouthfeel that old vines brings to the glass, as well as a perceived freshness. So that's the one point in terms of the quality of the wine. But then we've also seen that there is a commercial value to old vines. But at the end of the day, if you have an old vineyard and the yield drops, you need to ensure that that vineyard is sustainable. And the University of Cape Town, their business school, had a very interesting research study done by Dr. Jonathan Stein. And they actually determined that a consumer is willing to pay a certain amount more for each year that the vineyard is in the ground. And that amount relates to R2.96 for every year that the vineyard is in the ground. You can almost add that to your bottle of wine. So then we move into a space where old wines can become sustainable.
What sort of impact has this then had if you look from when you first began, from when things became officially signed off? How many vineyards have you saved, I suppose? How much of the greater South African vineyard has been preserved by bringing focus and attention to just how valuable and how important our old vines are?
We have seen a fantastic growth within the project. We increased from 8 members in 2016 to 136 members this current year. And collectively, they release close to 300 certified heritage vineyards wines per year. And we've also seen a fantastic growth in the old vine hectares. Of course, every year there are vineyards that become of age, but we have seen from 2016, the hectarage of old vine wines were about 2,900, and it's now up to 4,290. And that's about a 30% increase in the old vine plantings in South Africa over the last couple of years.
We are saving our South African wine heritage one vineyard at a time. How does the Academy then play into this? We'll come back to Nadia in a moment to find out. Miles, in between becoming part of the Old Vine Project and selling wines at auction and helping out our next generation, you've also been making some wine yourself, of course, and there are some new releases. Does it still get you excited? Do you still get the butterflies when the new wine comes out, you give it to market and you wait to see what the response is?
Yes, most definitely. You create a wine, especially in the case of the wine that I released this week, which is a Cabernet Sauvignon, and you create it and you blend it maybe after 14, 15 months in barrel, and you're very confident about the blend, and then you finalize the wine and you get it ready for bottling, and you're very happy and confident, and you put it into bottle, and then after bottling it normally doesn't taste nearly as great as it did. And then when you come up to the release, you're tasting your wine, and there's always this doubt: is the wine as good as I think it is? Because you're so close to these things. Then, if you're lucky, you get a good rating or two, and then you get a little bit more confident. But even when it comes down to the launch that I did this week of this wine, and I had 30 people sitting around a table at my house on a beautiful day, which definitely probably helps. But you're always nervous how people are going to receive the wine. And lucky in this case, the wine was exceptionally well received. And I think it just helps reaffirm why we in this game. We love wine. We enjoy wine with people. And that's what it should be about: enjoying wine with friends and family and food in particular. But also, we want to create something special and something that is going to last. And that's what we try to achieve. And hopefully that's what I achieved. But you're always nervous, but the wine was well received.
Which is no surprise, because you've been making exceptional wine for some time now. We go back to the Takara days and then into the Miles Mossop days. How, over that period of time, has Miles the winemaker changed? How has your wine evolved? The style that you give us and the wines that you offer.
I think initially when I started my career, my first couple of vintages were in South Africa, at Lima. And then I went overseas and I worked in Australia and I worked in Napa Valley. I worked in California, did a little bit of a stint in the south of France up to the Northern Rhone. And back then in the early part of the millennium, there was a lot of people chasing big, ripe, massively extracted wines, often with big oak. And I was obviously a young winemaker back then, and you were trying to emulate those wines that were being awarded internationally, especially the Australian style and the Californian style of wines. And then more recently, some of the wines coming out of South America. And I think what's happened over the time, I've sort of realized and found that, number one, not our fruit here in South Africa doesn't necessarily lend itself to making those style of wines. Perhaps I was trying to force a square peg into a round hole. It was the vineyards didn't produce the fruit style that would have spoken to those wines. But also, I found that I preferred drinking wines a bit more elegant. So I think what's happened over the years is the wines I produce are a bit more elegant, a bit more refined. Balance is a very, very important thing for me. Texture and finish is very important to me. So not just upfront fruit and power. And I think that's what's happened over the years. And I'd like to think the wines have evolved in that direction, but there's still wines that can age quite well.
You talk of wine that I think is not out of character with a lot of the wine I'm seeing coming into the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar. As you say, you have to go back too far, where a lot of particularly the cabs, the Bordeaux blends, were big and strong, and they had a fair set of shoulders on them. And now there is a lot more elegance, a lot more subtlety to many of the wines that certainly I'm drinking. Is that just a trend, or do you think this is South African winemakers finding that, yep, this is where we were always supposed to be, and this is the kind of style that's going to best reflect what we can make?
It does seem to be a worldwide trend for people to drink lighter style, often lighter alcohol wines. We're seeing that worldwide. That's the likes of Pinot Noir and Cinsault. Lower alcohol wines are really being well received by the wine drinking public. But I honestly do believe that as South African winemakers, we've sort of learned that the best style of wines that we produce are these wines with better elegance, maybe a bit more freshness. Let's call it a bit more European in style, a bit more old world in style, if you want to call it that. And it's taken us time to settle into what works best in South Africa. And I honestly believe that those style of wines do. I also believe as you get a bit older, you sort of want to drink more elegant wines. So I've always spoken about producing wines that I like to drink. And if I feel that it's a wine that I don't enjoy, or I'm not going to produce it or release it. So I believe it's a combination of a number of things.
You've given us, I think, a fairly good portrait already of what the new wine is like, but a little more detail, if you will. The new Cabernet Sauvignon is out for people who haven't yet had a glass, but are certainly looking forward to one, myself being top of that list. What are we getting from this new wine? What's making it stand out for you?
Well, I brought the open bottle, which we tried this week. This is the Sam 2020. So I have three different ranges of wines in my portfolio, and what I call the flagship range is the family range. And this is wines these are wines that are all produced with family members' names on the bottle. So I started off the project in 2004 with a wine named after my firstborn, Saskia, and then Max was born after that. So I brought out a Max, which is a Bordeaux red blend, and my daughter Kika was born later on, so we brought out a sweet wine named after her. And later on, I decided that it was time to lift my game and finally name a wine named after my wife, or produce a wine named after my wife. So the Sam was released. This is actually the fourth vintage of that wine. It released to great accolade and great results when I released it in 2020. It was actually in the COVID year. Was the 2017 was released, and it's done very, very well since then. So it's Cabernet Sauvignon from Stellenbosch. It's from the best vineyards that I work with. It's not a single vineyard. I keep being asked, is this a single vineyard wine? It's actually what I see as perceived as the best expression of Cabernet Sauvignon in Stellenbosch for me. So it's got to have some power, got to have some structure, but it needs some elegance and finesse. All those characteristics I spoke about earlier. 2020 was an interesting vintage. It was a relatively cool vintage to start, but it became quite warm towards the latter part of the vintage. It was a very early vintage. It was the vintage that we were shut down and locked down for COVID towards the end of it, and produced these wines of beautiful plushness and richness, but also quite a lot of structure and power. So it's a wine that will age beautifully for 15 years, I think, plus. And it's really made with intense care, and like all the wines we produce, but this is probably the flagship wine in the flagship range.
As it ought to be, Miles, if you're naming your wine after your wife. You have to make sure you get it absolutely spot on. Let's head back to Nadia. We've learned a whole pile about Cabernet Sauvignon on the last little stretch there with Miles. What about wanting to learn about the old vines? You've given us an introduction, Nadia. What am I going to learn if I join your academy? What is the motivation to pack up and come and join you guys for a schooling in the old vine world?
Dan, we are very excited about this project. Education and skills development has always been a very important part of the Old Vine project. And we do yearly pruning courses with vineyard workers. We have different workshops with our members. And now we've got a new way of education, which is an online training platform. And this will assist people in learning about the basics of old vines. And we really look at a few different areas. So we look at basics of what is an old vine viticulture, basic winemaking principles, all the way to how to actually serve wines and how to sell old vine wines. So it does give you a good overview of the project as a whole, and also at the end of the day, how you would sell these special wines. So it is ideal for someone that works on the restaurant floors as a wine steward or a sommelier, for Old Vine Project members, or anyone that works in the sales process of these wines.
Okay, so you've convinced me. It sounds like something I'd like to do. I have a genuine interest in this space. How do I get involved? What's the process?
So the online course is available for sale via our website. So you sign on, make your payment, and the courses are 1,250 Rand. And then once you've logged in, you can work through the course on your own pace. So if you want to do everything in 1 week, you're welcome to, but you can also phase it out when you have time available to complete the course. We also work with different groups. So if you are, for example, a hotel group or a restaurant group, you can contact me directly, and we can register a group of staff members as well.
All right, so lots of different options, lots of different opportunities to do this. It's a fun qualification to have. It's also an important one, and it sounds to me, it's almost as important to you guys as it is to the people who are doing the course, because the more people you educate in the wonders of old vines and the importance of them, the better it's going to be for not just your particular old vine space, but the wine industry as a whole.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's very important to look at the entire value chain to make sure that, the people that actually sell these wines, they need to be educated and know what the unique selling points are. And we hope, and it's definitely our aim, that this gets filtered down the value chain, and that it actually helps our wine producers and our wine growers to become more sustainable.
You've obviously got 100% support from Dan Really Likes Wine. I'm going to be doing the course and I'm really looking forward to it. How important is it to have people like Miles buying into this project so that people, when they have a look, go, oh, actually, Miles Mossop's part of this. It must be something I must have a look at. How valuable is that endorsement from our top winemakers?
Oh, it's extremely valuable. And I think it just showcases that we are a community and we collaborate and that we work together to improve the old vine category as a whole. Because if everyone in our community does well, we can build from there. So to have these incredible winemakers and wine growers part of the project is of extreme value to us. And we are very, very fortunate to have their support.
Which, as Miles has made clear, you most certainly do. And you've got guys like Miles, like many of our other top winemakers, Nadia, creating wine that really stands out. How much are you seeing as an organization the top wine critics, the international wine experts, whose judgment we value so much, spotting old vine wines from South Africa, realizing what they are, and giving recognition to them as wines of older vines from South Africa?
We are seeing fantastic feedback from our local wine writers and critics. There are a few competitions in South Africa where you can actually enter old vine wines and receive recognition for them. And then in the international scale, we have support from Tim Atkin, Jancis Robinson. We often connect with the Old Vine Conference with Sarah Abbott. Beautiful feedback from Neil Martin. So in terms of serious wine writers in the international space, they really do a lot to advocate for these beautiful wines. And you will see a familiar face. Tim Atkin himself also did a video interview for the Academy, so you will share his thoughts on old vines in South Africa too.
I love seeing areas like this grow and take flight as they are. And at the end of the show, we've got a little video which we can wrap up with to highlight just how important this space is and where the Academy is going to help to take that knowledge further. Miles, as we look at the old vine space in the broader context of South African wine at the moment, I said at the start of the show that having the auction and the Rugby World Cup at the same time is a nice coincidence, because they are two spaces that continue to do South Africa so proud in troubled times for our country. You see a lot of the world, you spend a lot of time in the wine community, but what's your honest appraisal of South African wine in a global space, given that we do tend to think that we're doing pretty well, and we're very proud when we see a South African wine on a top wine list or popping up internationally somewhere? Are we doing that well? Are you feeling that South African wine is in a good space in a global scale?
I think we're in a very, very good space. Our wines are being highly acclaimed and highly regarded in many, many spheres in the international space, especially when it comes to top sommeliers, top journalists. They see South Africa as not just a wine country that produces good wine, good value wine. They see South Africa as a wine country, as a wine growing area that can produce exceptional, international recognized wines. I do feel, however, that when it comes to the general wine drinking public internationally, and specifically in some countries, but I find it's almost general across the board, is there's still this perception of South Africa being regarded as a country that produces cheap, affordable wine. So to still achieve those listings, you get them, and they're quite rare, but they're not wide enough. We need to grow that perception. We'll need to grow the sort of the recognition of South Africa as being a wine producer who can produce wines that can sit on the wine list shoulder to shoulder next to the best wines in the world, competing at around the same price point. And generally, we're cheaper. Generally, the wines are more affordable than those wines, and the quality is of the same level, if not better. So we still a lot of work to be done in certain countries, a lot more than others. But I think we are making headway. And it's always, as I say, slowly catch a monkey. It's always a very slow process, and we just need to keep at it and keep at it. And I think we'll see the results. Probably it'll take another decade, but we are starting to see the results, and I think it'll just become more and more evident worldwide that we are a world competitor when it comes to our quality and our top level wines.
You use a word which I think has both good and bad impact on South African wine. The last week or so I've been in Northern Ireland, then in Scotland, and you walk into Tesco and there you see a bottom shelf of Tesco South African wine you've never heard of, that's clearly been shipped over in bulk and bottled under a nice, happily South African generic label, your Two Dancing Giraffes Chardonnay and the like. And it speaks to the very point that you make about value. And while we do take pride, I think, in the fact that we deliver exceptional wine at such good value comparative to a French or an Italian or a Californian or even some of the Australians, it also, I think, maybe sometimes brings us down a little, and that continued emphasis on, gee, South African wine is so good and it's such great value. We almost need to stop talking about that value element, because it's one that maybe holds us back somewhat in getting our wine to be delivered at the kind of prices that wine such as yours really does deserve, which should be up there on a par with the old world wines, which do command those top prices.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what you say is so true. And I think more so than just trying to get the image of South African wine up, which is important, and obviously that drags everything up, is, we're going to lose a lot of vines, a lot of vineyard plantings. Perhaps some of them are poor vineyard plantings planted in the wrong places, so that's not a bad thing. But farmers are struggling, really to make the wine growing, grape growing is not a very profitable business. Wine making is actually not a very profitable business. And to try and keep this industry alive and keep it afloat, we need to get that, as you say, cheap, cheerful, good value perception. We need to move away from that towards people going, okay, we're prepared to pay these prices, and this wine is very, very good. And then that just filters all the way down to the grape grower, and obviously through the communities of the farmers and the farm workers, and that will help uplift everyone. So it's more than just improving the image. It's something that needs to filter the whole way down, and the only way to do it is, as you say, move away from that perception that we are great value, cheap and cheerful wines. We need to move towards that, people prepared to pay good prices for wines that deserve it.
Easier said than done, of course. And for those of us in South Africa who know the difference between a Miles Mossop and a supermarket generic, there are many overseas who don't. And for them, a South African wine is a South African wine. And if you're used to paying £4 for it, why would I pay 40? There is work to be done. But some of that work, Nadia, is being done by you guys. You are leading South African wine into a really important space. A lot of work has been done in, I think, a relatively short space of time. The Academy is a wonderful step forward. What else, though, is going to drive you guys forward? What is next on the horizon for taking this Old Vine project and growing it and making it an even more distinctive element of South Africa's wine story?
Yes, absolutely agree. I think relating to the image and building the image of brand South Africa, there has been a lot of work done. And I think a big focus area for us is to make sure that we have education right through the value chain. If you also look at the farm workers, we need to ensure that people are skilled and that they know how to work with vineyards. And in this way, we can have a greater influence on the quality of our wines. But it is extremely important to work throughout the value chain on the image, but also on wine grower level.
And that is going to nudge us up in a direction. You spoke earlier about that study at UCT and the just under R3 per year as things grow. Now at 35 years, that's a touch over R100 that you can add to a bottle in terms of what consumers have been shown to be happy to pay. But some of these vines go older than that. How far do our oldest vineyards go back, and what's the cutoff point, if there is one? Where do we say, it's lovely having a 100-year-old vine, but it's just not worth having it anymore? Is there a time where we say, enough's enough and it's time to move on?
South Africa is very fortunate to have a service, which is our South African Wine Industry Information Systems, and they have captured vineyard details dating back to 1900. So we've got this incredible database of vineyard plantings So if you look at the older vineyards, there are 10 vineyards older than 100 years in South Africa, and they still produce quality wines. A cut-off point would be, to ask, is this vineyard still sustainable, and does it deliver the quality wine that you would like to have in the glass? But there are techniques, and there has been a lot of work done by Ruessa and her team on pruning these vines correctly, taking care of them, making sure that you work on your soil health, the entire ecosystem around this vineyard. So there are a lot of vineyard practices and philosophies that you can apply to improve the vineyard's life and the quality of grapes that you get from it.
And in terms of the specific grapes, we heard Miles mention that he's got an old vine Chenin and also an old vine Sauvignon Blanc, which is not a grape we traditionally associate with age in any sense in South Africa, drinking Sauvignon Blanc generally far too young, as we do, and as we try and change where we can through the show. Chenin Blanc does seem to have found a very natural home in the old vine space. Are some grapes more suited to the older vines than others?
If we look at the old vine plantings in South Africa, over 52% of these vineyards are Chenin Blanc vineyards. And that's also due to the fact that there was a lot of Chenin Blanc planted. But we do see a lot of beautiful Chenins out there. But what we also now are starting to see is especially Sauvignon Blanc, Pinotage, Cinsault. So there is a revolution of different varieties coming through in our old vine portfolio. And I think that's very exciting to see the different wines that are being released.
Just another good reason to go exploring and drinking South African wine. Miles, you're well into what is a storied career. Old Vines now added to the collection of areas in which you work and which you still have fun with, as I can see. What keeps you excited this far into your wine career, having made so much wine, having done so well with the wine that you've made? What gets you jumping out of bed and charging off to the cellar in the morning?
I think for me, when I was younger, it was wanting to produce everything I could, produce every variety, every style you can. What I've done in the more recent years, I still have a large range of wines, probably too large, but I've sort of tried to focus a lot more. And what gets me really excited is projects like working with vineyards, like the old vineyards that I do work with, producing those wines, and then also seeing how the region that I've sort of focused on, the region that I'm based in, which is Stellenbosch, and seeing how it's coming back to the fore with Cabernet Sauvignon Bordeaux blends, and that gets me very excited. It's and then also just seeing the sort of the new blood and the youth coming into the industry. I mean, people still sometimes refer to me as one of the young winemakers. I'm quite clearly not anymore, but looking at the young winemakers that are coming into the industry that have this real passion for what we have in South Africa. When I started in the industry, I think we were a little bit disconnected, and we were trying to produce everything for everyone. And what's happened in the 25 years that I've been making wine and been involved in the wine industry, we've now seen a very, very intense focus on what works best where, talking about varieties and wine styles in the different regions and different soil types. And we've got these young winemakers coming into the industry who are learning this, and they're going to just take it further. So I think that is probably what excites me the most. It's going to see this industry over the next decade, probably 2 decades, really, really, really consolidate and focus on what we do really, really well. So yeah, that's probably what gets me going.
I suspect that if you weren't still excited, it would be time to hang up the winemaking shoes, but I can't see that ever happening because it's clearly so rich in the blood. What about the element of surprise, of being taken aback? Do you still, every now and again, whether it's your own or other people's, pour a glass of wine and just get the breath taken away by how good or how different or how striking a wine can be?
Yeah, most definitely. I think for me in the last decade, or maybe less, 5 years, seeing varieties like Palomino and Colombar and Cinsault, producers that have really come, and often these are from old vines as well, that come to grips with how best to reflect the characters of the environment that those vines grow in, as well as the varietal itself. I mean, often these varieties were perceived as being neutral, uninteresting, often used for distillation or big bulk commercial blends at very, very low prices. And seeing how some winemakers have been able to take these varieties, which are perceived as not very interesting, and producing very bland wines, and producing wines of exceptional quality, and focusing on the textural components, the mouthfeel components of a wine. So yeah, I do get surprised often. And one thing that I think has surprised me as well quite recently is the quality of, I don't produce a Chardonnay, but the quality of our Chardonnays in South Africa. And Chardonnay was very popular in the 90s and into the early part of the millennium, and then it became very unpopular because people hated the style. And winemakers in South Africa have really, and there's some exceptional wines out there, come to grips with the variety in our context and producing some exceptional wines.
It's a category that's getting a lot of praise internationally as well, South African Chardonnay, and I've had some lovely examples in the last little while. You might have slightly preempted my wrap-up question for you, Miles, but I'll ask it nonetheless. The crystal ball of Miles Mossop, Chardonnay flourishing, and I think will continue to for some time. We talked at the start of the show, the evolution of the style of Cabernet Sauvignon and wines in general becoming more elegant and a little more refined and subtle. What are you seeing in the next 5-10 years? What's going to pop up and catch our breath with something new or different for South African wine?
I think with the attention on climate change and global warming, a lot of producers are really looking at varieties, and specifically different varieties to sort of preempt what might be coming, what is coming our way. With much more extreme weather events, warmer climates going forward, warmer seasons going forward, hotter, bigger, more extreme heat waves. So I think what we're going to see is those vineyards that are being put into the ground now, of mostly Mediterranean grape varieties are being planted. I mean, one in particular, Acertico, has been getting a bit of attention, and I think we're going to see a proliferation of these new varieties coming to the fore. Not quite sure how the wine drinking public is going to, the wine consumer is going to react to them, because they might still want to just have their Chardonnay, their Cabernet Sauvignon, their Shiraz, and their Sauvignon Blanc. But I think we're going to see a great shift towards these varieties, and these styles of wines are going to be produced that are going to be really sustainable, taking us forward. Perhaps not in the next 5 to 10 years they're going to become that relevant, but they're going to start coming out, and they are going to start becoming relevant over the next couple of decades.
The Acertico in particular is something that's come up a lot on the show. You remember through the month of August, we did a series of shows from Greece, and we've tasted on the show a couple of South African Acerticos. So I think Miles is spot on the money there. Nadia, we know that the old vines are only getting stronger. The Academy is one way to support, and we'll get a reminder from you in a moment of the details if people do want to sign up. Just generally, though, I guess the simplest way to support the Old Vine Project is to look out for the Old Vine wines. Is there a sticker? Is there some recognition? How do we know what an Old Vine wine is and where to find one?
So our Old Vine wines carry the Certified Heritage Vineyard seal, and it is a seal that is either on the bottleneck of the wine or incorporated in the back label, and this carries the plant date of the vineyard as well. So definitely look out for those wines. Follow us on social media, join the Old Vine Academy, and you are welcome to reach out to us if you're producers and you want to get involved and join the Old Vine Project on a producer level as well.
All right, it's only going to grow, and I think we see from the UCT research that Jonathan did, plus the words of Nadia and indeed of Miles, that it is such a valuable space to be part of, not just for protecting South Africa's wine heritage, but there's some commercial reasons as well, which are always rather important. Just a reminder then, if you will, Nadia, if I want to sign up, if I want to come and join you, where I need to go, what I need to do.
So if you would like to join the Old Vine Academy, you can visit our website at www.oldvineproject.co.za, and then just visit the Old Vine Academy webpage, and that will give you all the details you need. Or you're welcome to reach out to us on social media as well.
All right, we'll show you a video in a second to give you a reminder of why this is a really important course to do if you've got a general interest in South African wine, and if you're in the industry, then even more so. Nadia, to you and to Andre and to Rusa and the rest of the team, congratulations. You've taken a space that I think was sitting a little on the fringes of South African wine, and you've thrust it quite forcefully into the limelight, and very welcomely so. I will be doing the course, and very happily so, but good luck with it. And Miles, I've got some Sam to drink once I get back to South Africa. I'm looking forward to doing that. Well done on the new release, but also congratulations to you and the Guild on a great weekend. It's a very inspiring space, and you do terrific work, and there's some electric young talent coming through, and a big part of that is you guys ushering it all in. So thank you both. Lovely spending time with you. Looking forward to my course, looking forward to some wine. Have a fabulous wine drinking week, and we look forward to having you both back on the show again soon.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, Miles.
So there we go. Miles Mossop, one of South Africa's modern winemaking greats. Nadia Heffer oversees the Old Vine project and its new academy, which I shall be signing up for just as soon as the show is done. If you'd like a little more detail, well, here it is. We play out with a quick video which showcases the Old Vine project, the academy, and the work that is being done. I really do encourage you, if you've got an interest in wine, sign up. It's an incredibly valuable learning space. That does it for today. We'll see you back on the show on Thursday. Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Have a great wine drinking week. See you Thursday. Goodbye.
Bigger question really is, do those old vines contribute anything to the style of the wine? And I think they definitely do. And I think that their best old vine wines, or old vineyards really, have a memory. And I think that sometimes comes through in the wine.
So role players within the industry have to register with SARVIS, and we keep records of all the vineyard blocks. So currently on our system, we have vineyard blocks that date back to 1900s.
The old vines, they're kind of like people. They don't get stressed out by sudden weather changes. They always take their sweet time. It's almost as if they had a mouth. They would say, you know what, relax. I've seen this before. I'm going to take my time now. And with that comes beautiful flavors in the resultant wine at the end of the day, and a concentration.
How do we fight climate change? I think we should go greener and become more sustainable and more self-sustained system.
Well, Chenin Blanc is so diverse. It's like our cultures. They're different, they taste different, and Chenin Blanc speaks for itself.
You've actually got to think of the wine, consider what is its intention. What does this wine want to be?
Old vine wines are complex, contemplative, and gentle. These wines have personality, a story to tell in the vineyards and on the palate, a tale of time. They exist because of the people who tended them and touched them over years, and I think it is essential to find gentle, harmonious pairings.
And so as it's grown over the years, this category, with more producers having valid claims to old vines.
I think there's extraordinary value in the old vine category, both in the domestic and in the international market, and obviously specifically for South Africa. South Africa was the first of the major wine producing countries to create a register of old vines, and in that sense we are a leading player in the field.
By having the old vine on the label, it adds a certain cachet. It gives the sommeliers something to talk about, and sommeliers love talking and telling stories because that's what helps them sell wines.
So retailers, restaurants, hotels have the opportunity of utilizing the Old Vine Project's collateral. There is the seal that's on the bottle, of course, and the producer's website, etc. But there's also an opportunity of now using that within your environment.